But sharing small things indirectly can sometimes work well, and not like directly opposing your in-law in front of other people is really important. Sabko Namaste, welcome back to the Invisible India podcast. Now, last episode, we talked through everything in-laws, being involved in an Indian family. If you are a non-Indian, how does that feel? How do you adjust? What are some of the challenges? We talked last time about meeting for the first time, connecting, building relationships, some of the faux pas, etc. So today we're going to go a little bit deeper in that. If you want to hear my background story, you can go back to the previous video and hear more about my story and why I am talking about this topic. We are going to share a little bit about the deeper aspects, conflict, disagreement, things of that sort. So some of the questions that I had before preparing for this episode, people had sent in, those who are in a relationship with an Indian, if they are a non-Indian themselves. And probably some of the biggest questions, I'm going to categorize them together. A lot of these have to do with expectations and conflict. So let's dive in. Question number 1, expectations. How do you handle different expectations with your in-laws? What are the deal breakers, yours and mine? This is probably the biggest question that you could possibly ask of any relationship, much less of a cross-cultural relationship. I think that when you are dealing with expectations, it's really, really good to get clear with your partner on what their expectations are and what they suspect their parents' expectations may be of you and of them. Sometimes it's hard to know until it happens. One of the things that I would advise is to look at other relatives that are around the same age as you, maybe in a similar situation, and try to see how their parents reacted to them in different life decisions that they made. It's very important, especially in Indian culture, to for other people kind of compare themselves as elders or as siblings. People are constantly comparing themselves to their relatives. So seeing how cousins reacted to certain things, or aunts and uncles reacted to certain things. If you don't have a precedent at all, then it's likely that you may be in a totally kind of disconnected community, or your in-laws immigrated from somewhere and they're kind of in a different situation. So it's hard to say. That's the number one thing I would say, is go look around and see. It's going to be very hard to ask directly, how many kids do you expect us to have? Or on holidays, what do you expect me to do when I don't know about these certain rituals, but I need to carry them on anyway? Like, it's very hard to ask those things. And so it's going to be by trial and error, and it's going to be by observation. For example, if there is a ceremony coming, a big one, let's talk about this. This is a tough one. Head shaving ceremony for children. This is one, especially in North India, that a lot of people struggle with from a Western perspective. How important is that to your in-laws, and how important is that to you? This is not one of those things that you can ask ahead of time. Like, oh, if someday we have kids, would you want us to do the Mundan Sanskar? It's very tough to, in that moment, ask. And I think a lot of those things go through negotiation. If you've already been through a number of holidays with your in-laws, they're more likely to defer to you and say, hey, whatever you want to do, if you've cooperated in other things. What I like to do, and what I advise people, is pick your battles. And if it's, oh, can you please wear this on this occasion, or can you do this on this occasion? If you're willing to compromise or move a little bit towards them in those situations, a lot of times when the bigger things come, like if you want to shave your child's head, or if you are going to circumcise your son or not circumcise your son, or things that are actually kind of a life-altering or a decision, what you're going to name your child, or what kind of a ceremony you're going to have for your wedding, those kind of big ones, I would say cooperate in the little things, and then when it's actually something you really care about, that's when you have a little more leeway to say, hey, this is what I actually want. So that's my advice. I think a mistake that a lot of people make is they make really harsh boundaries in the beginning. I'm not going to touch their feet, or I'm not going to learn to cook. That's sexist. Or I am not going to call this relative auntie and uncle. I'm just going to call them by their first name or whatever. How important is that actually in the grand scheme of things? I think being willing to compromise and being willing to pick your battles goes a very long. In the same vein, what do you do when you disagree on something? Again, this depends on how much leverage you have, how long you've been in relationship. But I would say that in the beginning phases, it's really best to defer to your partner when any kind of disagreement is going on. Let them handle it. One rule we have in our relationship, again, this is not necessarily, doesn't necessarily work for everyone, and I'm not the model person when it comes to marriage. Let your partner deal with their parents and you deal with your own. That is kind of our law when it comes to sensitive matters, when it comes to things that are really tricky. Just let that person deal with it themselves, even if it has to do with you. If you have a conflict with your mother-in-law, for example, it's actually best sometimes to let your partner handle their own parent. That would be my tip. So disagreeing on something, again, you don't want to be like direct, like let's sit down and have a whole hash out festival. That's likely not going to go well. But sharing small things indirectly can sometimes work well, and not like directly opposing your in-law in front of other people is really important. So if you're going to have like a private conversation or something that is bothering you or something that you want to change, having that private conversation would be much better than having a whole hash out if there are other people involved or if it's at a public event, because you don't want to bring dishonor on the family or shame them. You don't want there to be like a blowout in front of other people. This is a very difficult thing for people who are in an honor-shame culture like India is. Where in the West, we're more individualistic, like you want to have a blowout, like whatever, it's fine. It's not always fine, but in India, it's like devastating to have a blowout in front of other people. Let's talk about boundaries. This is a hot topic, important piece of conversation. What boundaries look like in a Western sense and what boundaries looks like in a communal culture, shame honor culture, or less individualistic culture like India look very different. So if you tell someone to their face, please don't call me after 10 p.m. because I'm sleeping, and they continue to do that, in a Western sense, that's super rude. Like, you are disrespecting my boundary. You need to stop. However, in an Indian sense, how you would deal with that is just not answering the phone, turning off your phone, silencing them, maybe blocking that number after a certain time. And there's the indirect communication that they will figure out you're not going to pick up your phone after 10 p.m. Or if there's a problem with the child of, please don't, I've had plenty of conflicts with disciplining and managing my kids with my in-laws. For example, I'll share one. I had asked my in-laws not to feed sweets to my children because it often would spoil their dinner. And I don't care if they feed sweets to them at certain times. But being a Westerner, I tend to eat earlier. So in India, a lot of times you'll have dinner at 10, sometimes even 11 p.m., and then go directly to sleep. I don't like that habit. It doesn't work for me physically, and I don't want my kids to form that habit either because it's, whatever. We have a lot of obesity in my family, and I just don't want my kids to get into that habit. So I had asked, I eat a lot earlier. We'll eat at like 7 p.m., which is super late for some Westerners, but it's way early for Indians. So my in-laws would think, okay, this is snack time. It's around 6 p.m. I can just give the kids candy. and I would request, like, please, please don't give candy, please don't give candy. So one of the things we actually ended up doing was, instead of please don't give candy, and having it be this big conflict all the time, was I would ask, I would call ahead of time and say, hey, our son really wants to eat some of your fresh prata, to my mother-in-law, and could you make some prata instead for him? So knowing that they want to feed, the point is they just wanted to feed the kids something as an expression of love, and candy is an easy thing. But even better, I've asked, can you please make this prata, which our kids love, which is also healthy, and is it going to spoil their dinner? Sure, but who cares? Because it's somewhat healthy and it's not candy, and the point has been accomplished, that the grandparents were able to feed the kids something, and it's able to go. So that boundary was something that I could have dug my heels in and said, don't feed candy, don't feed candy, don't feed candy, don't feed candy, and then stop going over there and made a big deal about it. Or you could just say, let's do this instead, and that can work. So again, it's drawing these like firm lines in the sand doesn't always work, but letting the natural consequences of things roll out can also sometimes be in your advantage. I hope that example made sense. So that wraps it up for my part 2 of all things Indian in-laws. I hope that you enjoyed this, and I hope that you learned something. Please write comments. Write to me, jessica@invisibleindiapodcast.com. You can also comment on social media, DM me on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter as well. And please feel free to send in more questions. I love these kind of situations where we can discuss and go through different situations, and I can share my thinking. So thank you, namaste सबको सुनने के लिए धन्यवाद. Please आप subscribe कीजिए, share कीजिए, and be sure to check out my Hindi course for those of you who are wanting to learn Hindi. LearnHindiAnywhere.com. चलिए